this is Phil. Welcome back to the show. I am here with Sky Jitani.
Hi, Phil.
He's still wiping the sleep out of his eyes because I had to wake him up to be here by 2 p.m. Because he's a freelance writer. And Christian Taylor is not here. She is moving. Moving day's coming up.
There's a move-related obligation.
A move-related obligation.
Right.
You can interpret that however you want to.
She's actually taken a position with the Trump White House.
Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video. Hey, it's a podcast. Selena here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. Oh, we'll talk to Sky.
Hi.
But Christian's gone. She's not here to smile while I'm singing my song. And Sky sure as heck isn't going to smile while I'm singing my song.
I'm smiling.
Hey, it's a podcast. Selena here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. Okay, we've got guests that are beaming in from the West Coast. Very excited. They're huge stars. Huge stars.
You're welcome.
Yeah. We've got Jamin. It's Jamin, right?
Jamin, yes.
Jamin Goggin or Goggin?
Man, you nailed it first time
Jamin
out.
Goggin.
I'm impressed.
Jamin Goggin.
We had a Goggin ice arena in college. It was no relation, I assume.
Really?
Yeah. So
Did
If there is, I need to look into that.
Did you pay for Sky's ice arena?
No, but I want to find out whoever that's attached to my family is involved, because I like some of that.
Miami University, Oxford, Ohio.
Has a Goggin
Wow.
ice arena.
Oh, they used to. I think they tore it down.
Oh,
and
yeah, they
built
tore it
another.
down.
Whoa.
It's like, what? This came from the Goggin family?
Yeah.
Forget it. Send it back. And we have Jamin Goggin and we have Kyle Strobel. Are you any relation to any other Strobels in Christian publishing?
I am related to many Strobels, many of which are in Christian publishing.
There you go.
Okay. Anyone's named Lee?
Lee's my father.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Kyle,
so-
I am your father.
Kyle Strobel.
It was just begging to be down.
Yeah, it was. When he says he's my father, I mean, it's just,
Okay.
couldn't have said he's my dad.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have done that.
Right. Has he ever had to explain anything you've done by writing a short memo called The Case for Kyle?
It got close a couple times in high school, I think.
Okay.
What evidence has he actually presented to prove that he's your father?
Yeah. Yeah. Seriously.
DNA tests?
How can you be so sure? Just like Jamin taking credit for the ice arena at Ohio University. We don't know. We don't know if it was him.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
The sales from Is this your first book or have you had other books?
Oh, they got other books.
Oh, you got other books. So the sales from your other books paid for the ice arena.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Good to know.
Seed money.
Jamin Goggin serves as a pastor at Mission Hills Church. Where is that?
San Marcos, California, North San Diego County.
Oh, that's fantastic. North San Diego.
I love
County.
San Diego.
That's a nice. That's a nice part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They don't have a football team anymore.
No. Well,
That's right.
Okay. It hasn't moved yet.
Well, they're moving to Los Angeles.
Yeah, but it hasn't moved yet.
But the season's over
All
for
their
them.
all their
I mean,
stuff.
what do you want them to do?
All their stuff is still there, right? They
I'm not
can't
sure
even
if you guys heard about the initial announcement of the Chargers move at the Clippers game a few weeks back.
No.
They had a Chargers player in the audience, and they announced it. This is right after the news broke, and they announced it. They put the new logo up on the screen. They had a player stand and wave, and the entire arena booed.
Yeah,
Ooh.
I bet.
Ugh.
Well, why would you? Yeah.
I was.
Why?
I think I was at the very last St. Louis Rams game because
Yeah.
they're leaving St. Louis too.
Yeah.
And so it's
I was at the last Brooklyn Dodgers game in
Really?
in '56.
no, you were not.
No, I wasn't.
Wow.
Everyone had something special to say, and I didn't have anything special. So I made something up. I lied.
Okay.
I'm sorry. This
Where
is
were
turning
we?
into a VeggieTales
Mission Hills. We
episode.
were talking about Mission Hills.
Junior. You shouldn't have lied. Jamin Goggin is pastor at Mission Hills Church. He's been in pastoral ministry for 11 years, including as pastor of spiritual formation at Saddleback. I've heard of that. Kyle Strobel is a professor of spiritual theology and formation at Talbot School of Theology, Biola University, and is an emerging voice. I love people that are emerging voices because you get the picture of like a baby chick coming out of the egg.
That's not the image I had.
Cheap. What image do you
I
have?
can't say what I have.
Jim Carrey coming out of the back of the
Something like that, yeah. Something like that.
back of the is it rhino?
Rhino,
The back of
yeah.
a rhino's butt.
Yes.
And, yeah. And then what movie?
My emerging voices usually aren't ones you want to hear.
It was Ace Ventura 1?
Pet Detective 2.
Or 2. It was 2.
It's the one with the bat
Pet
guano.
Detective 2. Yeah, okay. So that's what Kyle Strobel is. Just hold that picture in your mind. He's an
you go.
emerging
right.
voice among evangelicals on spiritual formation, discipleship, theology, and rhino dung. They have a new book. We'll get to the new book in a minute. And speaking of rhino dung, my news story
Here we go.
my news story today is incredibly appropriate for a segue from rhino dung.
Okay, I saw the headline.
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting closer to you than normal. and
Yeah,
see
I
your
know, and
computer.
it's bothering
And
me.
I'm curious how long you've been hanging out of this story.
Couple weeks. No, look, January 21st. It's dated January 21st.
That was a couple
this is
days
brand
ago.
stinking new. It's still
fresh.
It still smells.
Yes, it does.
Here's the headline: When horse diapers and freedom of religion collide. A law requiring horses to wear equine diapers is dividing a Kentucky town where Amish residents say it violates their religion. Don't you love that?
Equine diapers.
Equine.
Equine.
Yeah, Equine. That was your
Equine?
rapper name.
Equine.
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 Equine or equine.
Equine.
Horse diapers. Let's just call them what they are. They're horse diapers.
Horse.
Horse diapers.
They're not really. Are they diapers or are they bags?
They're bags. Two Amish men in Auburn, but they're called horse diapers. Two Amish men in Auburn, Kentucky filed a lawsuit last month saying a city ordinance requiring horses to wear equine diapers, bags designed to catch a manure. And what is a diaper if not a bag designed to catch manure? That's a diaper.
I guess so, but I don't know. A diaper feels more like a garment, whereas a bag is
well,
just a bag.
If you're a horse, you probably aren't going to notice the difference. The new law, which the city said was spurred by complaints from neighbors about horse manure, requires a quote-unquote properly fitted collection device
And how does this violate their religion?
to be placed
I mean,
on
if they do it with
horses.
clasps instead of buttons or zippers, then why can't that work?
Well, let me tell you, the plaintiffs are members of the Old Order Swartzentruber Amish religion, one of the most conservative Amish orders.
Oh, there's conservative Amish and there's liberal
yeah,
Amish?
Yeah, they're not those crazy liberal Amish. No, that have shiny clasps and buttons. No, before the ordinance passed in 2014, the community elders decided the equine diapers wouldn't be permitted by the Swartzentruber Church. And now, like 20 different Amish men have been fined for violating the horse diaper.
Okay, but
ruling.
why? What is it about their doctrine that doesn't allow for horse diapers?
They decided it was worldly. It was worldly to diaper your horses.
Do they diaper their
The
children?
world diapers their horses.
Do they diaper their children?
The old-fashioned way.
That's fine. I'm not asking if it's a Pampers or
they-
disposable diaper. It's cloth, I'm
they
sure.
wrap them in straw. I don't know.
Because if you can
know,
diaper
it
a
doesn't
child,
really
why
make-
can't you diaper a horse?
But this is interesting. Due partly to large family sizes, the Amish population is doubling every 20 years, making it likely such clashes over modern government regulations will continue, legal experts say. The Swartzentruber Amish have only been in Auburn, Kentucky for a decade. They moved.
Oh.
They're new in town. They're immigrants. They're new in town. It's everything that's going on in America right now.
Okay,
the
but-
whole last year is summed up in this one story.
Well, I do think of horses' butts when I think of the last year in politics. I'm still not clear from this article about what is it about the bags that violates their beliefs.
Doesn't really say.
Isn't that the crux of the matter?
why a horse diaper violates their religious beliefs? But that's not the point.
It is the point.
No, you don't
Well,
have
no,
to-
no. This is the point because
What?
if this is a brand new doctrine of theirs, like
Yeah.
they just decided we're not
Yeah.
going to do this.
Someone had a revelation from God.
Well, if it was like a long-standing,
Thou shalt not diaper thine horses.
if they split from the more liberal
Nor
Amish
thine wives.
over poop bags on horses, then I'd be like, okay, this is a long-standing part of their identity.
yeah,
But if this is just, the English are telling us we have to have poop diapers for our horses, and we're just not going to do it.
Group of Amish got in trouble with their local city code because they refused to put the bright orange hazard signs on the back of their buggies. They said it violated their religious freedom. Orange hazard signs.
That I can actually almost understand.
Jesus did not wear an orange hazard sign on his back end.
You don't know that.
Nor an equine diaper.
Okay. I can almost understand the orange hazard sign,
Why?
slow-moving vehicle.
Why?
Because it's reflective. It has modern technology.
It's reflective.
Yeah, and it's a symbol.
Okay, it's a symbol.
Yeah, and they're pretty austere. They don't do symbols.
And in this county, they were pentagram shaped, which might have been part of the problem.
But I don't get why a bag I mean, let's face it.
Yeah.
A bag that collects poop
Bag collects
seems pretty old. That's not like modern technology.
You'd think it would be old, but no. Up until the 50s, we just let our poop fall where it.
What about this?
Wait.
What about this? What if what if they said, okay, you don't have to have the equine diapers.
Yeah.
But you now have to pick up every piece of poop that falls from your horse immediately upon falling.
Okay, here's the funny part.
What?
The Amish said they would do that.
But not on Sunday.
They said they would keep shovels in their buggies so they could stop and pick up poop. But
And where do they put it? I'm guessing they put it in a bag. They don't just throw it in their wagon. Why can't they hang the bag off the horse's rear?
that's too advanced technology.
Where do they put it?
They throw it into the bushes. I don't know where they put it, but the county said it's dangerous to have people in buggies stopping in the middle of the highway and going out with a shovel in the highway.
I think it's probably dangerous to have people in buggies on a highway, period.
Yeah, but that's why they put the shiny things on the backs.
But they won't do that either.
No, this is not the Schwarzentroopers.
Oh, now I'm no.
The Schwarzentroopers.
No. This I'm not having. This I'm not having. If you will put a reflective modern symbol on the back of your buggy, but you will not hang a bag behind your horse.
Yeah.
This is hypocrisy.
Slippery slope, my friend. Slippery slope. Now.
You know what else is slippery? Highways full of horse poop.
That's true. No, not as slippery as you'd think, because it's full of straw.
I don't get this. I think you got to be consistent. This is why I respect the Catholic Church's view. You know, the seamless fabric of life from the womb to the tomb.
Bring it back to Catholics.
If you're going to have an ethic, it needs to be a consistent ethic.
Consistent ethic.
If you will put a sign on the back of the buggy, why won't you put a bag on the back of the horse?
See, but here's the slippery slope. Who's supposed to decide?
I'm not.
When a religious group is out to lunch. See, we got the establishment clause.
That's exactly why I was asking, was the horse bag thing a long-standing doctrine, or was this something that they just came up with just to be difficult?
Putting a colander on your head a long-standing doctrine?
No, which is why the government doesn't recognize flying spaghetti monster as a religion.
Well,
because it's satire.
A few people have gotten to wear them in their driver's license photos.
Where?
On their heads.
Either this story is poorly written without necessary detail, or these Amish are just trying to make life difficult for their Kentucky neighbors.
Yeah. It doesn't. That's really the question no one asked is, what's your theological underpinnings for
undergarments for horses?
Diapering your horses? If they were Mormon horses, they'd have to wear them already.
All the time.
All the time. And that's not present. But see, it's putting the government in the position to have to decide, to have to split the baby. Is that a valid religious belief or not? And that's exactly what the Founding Fathers didn't want the government to be involved in. Was doing,
I agree.
Splitting theological babies.
At the same time, I have too many questions. I would still
You
want
have
to.
too many questions?
I have too many questions.
Before what?
For them, for these Amish.
Before you make a determination as to whether their religious beliefs are valid?
Yes, and I'm not in the government, so I can do that kind of judging.
Judge not, lest ye be diapered. Okay. We have guests on the show.
Save us.
We'll follow that story. It's a fast-moving story. There's sure to be more developments in coming weeks. The,
I'm going to put a Google alert.
the great Amish horse diaper kerfluffle. I almost said falafel, but that's not a term for an argument.
No, it's not.
No, that's
a term for lunch.
Lovely dish made from chickpeas. Okay, we have two guests with us, Jamin Goggin and Kyle Strobel. Kyle is the son of a famous apologist. Jamin goes around the country building ice arenas. And together they've written a book. The book is called, I don't have a copy of it. No one sent me a copy of the book.
I have it.
You have the book?
Yeah, I endorse the book. And it's got a great cover, by the way.
Yeah, it does.
I have
like the
to
cover.
bring this
I like
up whenever
I
we
wanted to
have
hold it
authors
up.
on, because there's so many Christian books out there with really bad cover design.
yeah.
And you guys did
Yeah.
it right. I don't
Okay.
know who was responsible for that, but it's cool.
The book is called, I would hold it up if I had one, but they didn't send me one. The book is called
Well, I don't have a copy of the actual book.
Oh, you said you had one.
I have a copy of the
Is
the
it
PDF.
out? Is the book out, guys?
It comes out tomorrow.
Oh, that's why I don't.
That's the day
it's
of this
not even
podcast.
out
It's
yet.
today then.
That's
Comes out
fabulous.
today. Comes out
Sorry,
today.
Except
right.
we're recording a week ahead. Are we? Because you're
Oh.
leaving town for 2 weeks.
I'm going to Thailand.
You're going to Thailand.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a department in the basement of Big Idea called Thailand.
I remember that
You
place.
remember
I
that? Yeah.
had ties everywhere.
Because someone had a collection of strange ties, and that was hanging over the entrance. Anyway,
I think that's cultural appropriation.
the book is called.
not good.
Because
You're making fun of someone's culture.
we wear ties. It's true, we wear ties, so we're not
Well,
culturally
we
appropriate.
don't. But
Okay.
I don't. I thought it was
The
insensitive.
book is called The Way of the Dragon or The Way of the Lamb. Here's the subtitle, okay, if you want something that's makes you think. Searching for Jesus' path of power in a church that has abandoned it. Ooh.
Sticks to you.
That's kind of aggressive.
Yeah.
It feels kind of aggressive. The church has searching for Jesus' path of power in a church that has abandoned it. By here's a good summary description. By painting a richly biblical vision of power through weakness and having intense, meaningful conversations with some of Christianity's most respected leaders like Dallas Willard, Marva Dawn, James Houston, John Perkins, Jean Vanier.
What do you think?
Number two.
French
Van
P.
Gogh.
Number two.
Jean Valjean. They actually tracked down Jean Valjean, Eugene Peterson, and J.I. Packer, Goggin and Strobel. Have you had their homebrewed whiskey, Goggin and Strobel? It's delicious.
That's more Way of the
It
Dragon.
used to be on sale at the ice arenas, but
Invite readers to join them on an adventure around the world as they begin to piece together the new old reality of following Jesus today.
I remember.
Did you follow that? Did you
yeah,
get that?
I got it.
Okay. You remember what?
I remember when this was just an idea. This book, because I was out in California with you guys, and you were telling me about your plan to do
When
this.
were you hanging out with them?
There's
Where
been
was
times.
I?
Not there. You were probably on Main Street at Disneyland
I
by
probably
yourself.
was. Yeah.
Anyway, you guys mentioned this to me as an idea that you had, and I was super excited back at that point. So to actually see it come to this point, I'm very excited.
Do you know what the horses wear at Disneyland? Horse diapers. They wear horse diapers. It's because they're not Amish, so it doesn't violate
it's-
their strict religious code. Not diapering your horses.
I don't even know what to say, Phil.
Yeah. The Way of the Dragon or The Way of the Lamb. Okay. The dragon sounds cooler. Right?
That's true.
I mean, if this was houses at in Harry Potter, and you say, do you want to be sorted into the
Dragon House?
House
the
of
Lamb
Dragon
House.
or the Lamb House?
The lamb's more delicious
Well, you're not you eat it.
with little mint jelly.
You don't get to eat the dragon if you go to the dragon.
House of Lamb sounds like a great Middle Eastern restaurant.
Both Kyle and Jamin were successful. You know what people are going to say about this episode?
That we needed Christian
They really
here.
needed Christian to keep the boys in line. Yeah, we're sorry. We're sorry, Kyle and Jamin.
All right, get back to the book. It's
okay.
really good.
We don't have our mother figure, and so we're all out of sorts. Both Kyle and Jamin were successful up-and-coming voices in the church when they experienced failure. So back up. How long have you been in ministry? And it started out going great, and then you each had some kind of a failure experience that made you rethink it. Am I getting this right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obviously different for a little bit of both of us in terms of Jamin being more in pastoral ministry, my more academic ministry. But I think the reason we both eventually kind of went into seminary and were kind of going towards ministry in general, as we look back now, was really more for power than anything else. We wanted to be great. And then as we were New Testament MA students, we kept running into Jesus, and Jesus kept saying these unfortunate things like, if you try to save your life, you'll lose it. And the first will be last and the last will be first, and these things. And we are constantly being confronted with a reality that we didn't quite know what to do with. We didn't know what it looked like. And really this drove us into these sage figures. I mean, this is where we started exploring and finding these different people who we thought really embodied this way and became kind of mentors of us throughout our seminary time and then well into ministry. But really, yeah.
That raises a question, though, because both of you guys grew up in the church. It isn't like you stumbled upon Jesus late in life and then decided to go to seminary to discover more about what this is all about. You guys grew up in the church, you're around the church, you've got ministry in your backgrounds and your families even. So why were you so surprised when you actually started looking at the teachings of Jesus to discover that his vision of leadership or power was different than the one you had assumed?
Yeah, I think for both of us, again, in different ways, but similarly, it became really easy to kind of adorn really kind of vice-laden motivations with Christian platitudes of leadership, and so
I think that needs unpacking.
Yeah, my heart's kind of desire for grandiosity and significance was usually explained as having bold faith and dreaming big for God's kingdom. My appeal to my own gifts and natural abilities to kind of get things done in ministry was usually framed as stewarding my talents and abilities as best I could for the sake of God's kingdom. And my own kind of internal beliefs and desires were, of course, ordering that. But I think for both Kyle and I, we also found ourselves in kind of a Christian ecosystem that kind of mirrored those ways of thinking. And much of what we saw growing up in the church as well was usually examples of people who really had made it big. We have been around people in ministry, obviously Kyle even in his own family, but for both of us growing up in church, a lot of the contexts we've been in, we've been around very kind of well-known, successful, large platform leaders.
Right. You're hanging out with Rick Warren and you're hanging out with Lee Strobel. So those are both kind of household names in the evangelical world. Jamin, in the book you write, in my early years of ministry, I was convinced that my quest for power was merely a fervent commitment to the important work of the kingdom. My grandiose fantasy of success was excused as an embrace of God's big plan for my life. I had big dreams because I had bold faith.
Yeah.
Is that something you came up with on your own, or do you feel like you might have heard that elsewhere in the church?
Yeah. Well, and I kind of had just narrated that a bit myself. I think the truth is, I think the result of the fall is we're all kind of bent towards this vision of autonomy and grandiosity, right? To kind of control life on our own terms, to make a name for ourselves apart from God. And so that's already kind of up and running in my heart. And I think, again, a lot of the environments I was around mirrored those things. I don't think at any point I was kind of instructed or taught, hey, here's how you really get ahead in the Christian scene, or here's how you make a name for yourself. But again, most of what I saw around me continued to kind of point me in these trajectories that my heart was already inclined toward in the flesh.
Well, I mean, everywhere I've gone, even when I was in seminary, there was plastered on the walls. It was all about changing the world.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's supposed to go out there and change the world, especially if you're in ministry. You're supposed to change the world, and you kind of marinate in that grandiosity. You're right. I think it is an inclination of our sinful soul to go that way anyway, but then it gets reinforced and fanned by
here's
our subculture.
Here's a question. Do you, because you mentioned specifically you're addressing the evangelical church, do you find this is less the case in other strains of Christianity? Is there something about modern evangelicalism that draws us more toward this success, grandiose motivation?
I think so. I mean, I think our revivalistic background, I think our propensity to make the sermon and maybe the music part of the worship the only things that matter. We have a propensity towards kind of guruism in evangelicalism. And I think in light of all of that, you look at our conferences, you look at the names we know, and they tend to be younger.
Yeah.
We tend to link excitement. One's personal abilities and talents are directly linked to a formula for success. Again, this stuff that comes right out of the revivals that has really painted evangelicalism in a way that if you're like, say, an Anglican church that's governed by the liturgy, where the sermon isn't the only thing that matters. I mean, different forms of higher level kind of liturgical churches are going to lower at least the propensity towards a kind of guruism. And they're probably, because of their ecclesial structure, going to value the elders a bit more. You have bishop figures, for instance.
So to try to figure out how to get away from evangelical guruism, you guys went off in search of gurus?
Ooh.
Well, yeah. What's funny is, the people we went to look after, I mean, these are people who really embodied what Nouwen called downward mobility. I mean, these are the opposite of gurus, right? This is Jean Vanier, who's probably the most important human ever to live to care for people with disabilities. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone else that has done more for this community. And he just lives with them, and he spent his entire life living with them.
I've never heard of him.
Jean Vanier, he mentored Henry Nouwen.
Oh, okay.
He's always up for the kind of Nobel Peace Prize.
Started the La Arch communities.
Okay.
He's the one that told Nouwen to leave his grandiose Ivy League.
Well, if he had a better PR firm, I might have heard of him.
Yeah. And this is not your typical guru, right? I mean, this is not someone who's setting up his platform. We had to use an hour and a half outside of Paris in this small town of like 1,500 people, and no one knew where he was. Like we talked to someone, they didn't even know who this guy is.
Yeah.
And I mean, most of these people, that's what it was like. We met with James Houston, who was mentored by C.S. Lewis. And it's like, if anyone could have been a guru, you think this would be the guy.
Right.
No one's looking for James Houston. He could be the most profound human being I've ever met.
Wow.
And every time we're meeting more and more people like this. Eugene Peterson, when he told us that when he stepped down from pastoral ministry, he thought, I guess I'm done being a pastor.
Yeah.
And he said what he realized is now every week or two, someone's flying to Montana to meet with him. Yeah. And he's saying, the Lord's just bringing me a different sort of congregation.
Yeah, he calls himself a megachurch pastor now.
Yeah. And so these are the people we wanted to sit with and get a sense of, what do you know? What have you experienced? What have you seen? James Houston, why did you leave the dream job at Oxford to start a school with 4 students for mere Christians in Vancouver? Like, what would possibly, I mean, I'm an academic, right? Like, Oxford, you left Oxford for what? Yeah. And I mean, all their stories were like that. And again, this very much confronted our sense of, no, you climb the ladder, you don't descend the ladder.
Right.
And
Always up, never down.
That's right.
Always up. And that's how you feel. Even in America, you grew up feeling that way. I remember feeling that way as I was getting older about buying cars. Like, every car I buy has to be a little nicer than the one before, or I'm failing, and then and when you make your first decision that my next car is going to be less nice than my prior car, the part of you is saying, this means that I've failed, that something's falling apart. But we look at that in everything. If you're a pastor, I imagine the notion of going from a larger church to a smaller church is the same thing, as downsizing your house or your car. You're just wired to think, well, this is the opposite of what it's supposed to be. Well, a pastor promoting Donald Trump last week said he's blessed by God because he has all these things. I mean, look, he has planes, he has buildings. There's no way you can have all that stuff and not be blessed by God.
Well, Adolf Hitler had a lot of stuff.
So clearly God
made
a mistake.
That's so ironic, because that was one of the core assumptions that the Pharisees made about people. And that's exactly what Jesus confronted and dismissed.
So we're making the same mistakes 2,000 years later.
Yeah, but beyond the planes and the cars and the houses, I think the popular currency in evangelicalism is influence.
Yeah.
If you have a bigger platform, if you have more influence, then it's a clear sign of God's blessing. And if you have less influence, it's because, you're not
doing it right.
And they can't entertain for a moment that actually more and more influence may be a sign that you're more captivated by a worldly value system than a godly one. Not necessarily, but it could be.
Okay, guys, in a nutshell, what's the way of the dragon? and what's the way of the Lamb, and what's the difference between them if they're both attempting to have power?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll start in and you can kind of add to it. But a key passage for us in the book is James 3, verses 13 through 18. And there, James kind of narrates two different ways of wisdom, ways of power. One is the way from above, and one is the way from below. But we appeal to that way of the dragon, way of the lamb language from Revelation that kind of corresponds to these two ways from above and below. But the way we end up distinguishing these two forms of power in the book, and that we kind of see James developing there, and then we see all throughout the rest of the New Testament in particular, is through two questions. Where does power come from, and what is power for?
Yeah.
And so the way from above is power from God, known in weakness for the sake of love. And the way from below is power found in the self for the sake of control. And what's perhaps most provocative about the way that James develops this is James is going to call the way from below the way of the world, the flesh, and the devil. Well, the language he uses there is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. But the history of the church, we've kind of coined this axiom, world, flesh, devil. And what James is saying in that passage is that the way from below, marked by selfish ambition, vain conceit, right, kind of a power that seeks to control and dominate and win, is not just kind of unfortunate or a little bit off kilter, but is in fact demonic. And so the stakes are high here, right? Yeah. The kind of power we choose to employ, where we appeal to find that power, our source, and how that power is ultimately directed, it makes a fundamental difference in whether we're participating in God's way or not.
Okay, but hold on. But that the power from self, for control, the problem is it's really effective. Right. That's right. So it works.
Yeah, what if it works?
It works. And not to name names, but there are very quote unquote successful ministries that have operated exactly that way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what do you do if it works?
I mean, this is what I think is so tragic about the ethos of evangelicalism right now. Because what we do, we see, like, let's say we see a pastor who cheats the New York Times bestseller list, right, for instance. Right? That's demonic. We want to say, oh, it's unfortunate. No, it's not unfortunate. That is the way of the devil. Right? James is very clear about this, right? There's the way of the world, the flesh, and the devil, and there's a way that we live by in the flesh, in the world, with the demonic. And that's what we're giving ourselves to. And so, and this is what, when we met with Marva Dawn, what shocked us both, because Jamin and I weren't necessarily prepared to confront this. Marva looked at us at one point and says, look, if you want to see the way from below, go to a pastor's conference. You want to see the way of jealousy? You want to see the way of selfish ambition? And she goes, and that is demonic. And it's a part of the powers and the principalities that Jesus stood against and that we're called to stand against. And I think, the second we had that interview, one of the things that happened with the book is the book was supposed to be really just power and weakness. But then which was, power and weakness is how we stand against the powers and the principalities of the world. And I think this is exactly what we have to do as evangelicals, is we have to learn how do we stand against this in the church itself. Yeah. When the church is actually tapped in to the structural evil, right? The powers and principalities. And it works, and it will work, but it will destroy us from within.
Right. Okay, why not? So power, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Isn't the solution for us to avoid power then? To give it up.
That's the temptation.
Give it up. I don't need any power. It's bad. It's of the world. And I'm going to put on simple clothes and wander around the earth and sing songs with my ukulele. Why?
That's from below.
You use your words to hurt.
Yeah.
So why?
Yeah, this is one of the temptations, right? I mean, there's a couple temptations here with power that to kind of respond to tyrannical or kind of unhealthy forms of power by either saying, well, the problem's just out there in these figures or whoever they are, or by kind of totally rejecting all notions of power outright, right? Yeah. Just power in and of itself is bad. But clearly what we see in the New Testament is not a vision of the Christian life that is powerless, but is a vision of the Christian life that finds power in a certain location, right? Power that is funded by the Spirit being operative in our lives, but that power is known in weakness, right? It's not kind of an appeal to ourselves and our own strength. And I think one of the passages that we also want to point to often in response to your question, Sky, is the passage in Galatians that talks about sowing to the flesh or sowing to the spirit, right? And the reality is that there may be some short-term gains. And if we're kind of judging the effectiveness of ministry or kind of kingdom outcomes also on a worldly system and grid of power, then yes, it sure can look like we're getting things done and making things happen. But ultimately, if we sow to the flesh, we will reap in the flesh. Ultimately, if we sow in the spirit, we will reap in the spirit. But the language you hear all throughout the New Testament for these kinds of things is language like hidden and small, and the time it takes for fruit to be produced, right? These are things that have to be discerned and weighed in a manner that oftentimes we're not patient to do, nor do we use a grid to actually look at.
Yeah, and there's a reason Paul says, do not grow weary in doing good. Because if you sow to the flesh, you won't have to grow weary. Because as you said, right, you'll bear fruit rather quickly. And it's not rocket science in how to grow a church quickly.
Yeah. So I had some pretty big success early on, and it made me feel pretty good about myself at the time. But it's funny because God really used VeggieTales in what I did, and there was lots of fruit from it. But internally, it was chaos. It was, it was killing me. It was killing my health. It was creating just havoc in the lives of the people that were trying to follow me because my leadership was so just crazy. So I've seen how God can use our work even when we're not being spirit-led or really when we're working in our own power, and we're killing ourselves.
Sure.
And I guess you've seen some of the same thing where, there's results there, and God can use you while you're doing that, but he's not necessarily pleased with what you're doing to yourself, and one of you made the statement somewhere in the intro or the early in the book, that it was an act of grace of God to let you fail.
Yeah, and as you were narrating that, I think the scene that comes to mind biblically for me there is Moses, right? Moses striking the rock, and of course, God instructs him for the second time to speak to the rock. Moses doesn't like that because it feels like he's kind of getting less done. So he strikes the rock again, knowing what worked the first time around. And it's this incredible scene where the results is the water is poured forth.
Yay,
right? God still
success.
God still moves and acts. I mean, thank goodness that his providence and his grace is not contingent upon us. And yet in the very same narrative, we hear that it's this act of rebellion, of kind of choosing to move in his own power, that is cause for Moses not entering into the promised land. Right?
Yeah.
So what we don't want to say is that God can't move or act in power if we're not faithful. But what we would want to say is what God desires most is for us to actually be congruent with his work, right? For his work to actually be connected to our own hearts and our own motivations and our own faithfulness.
Well, I think, one of the things that kind of I find really disconcerting in this process is the reality that God can kind of bear good fruit from us that isn't necessarily our fruit. And, we kept on running into people who, they would say things to us like, well, I go to so-and-so's church. Like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me about that. Why do you go to their church? They say, oh, well, admittedly, he's super arrogant, but he's such a good Bible teacher. I was like, wow, I don't even know what to say about that. Or they would say all these really offensive things about their pastor, but say, oh, but it's his ministry is so powerful. And I know like God is using that in a real way, but that really isn't his fruit. God is using the flesh for his own sake. And the reality that we can toil in this way, and eventually, as Galatians says, we can reap what we have sown. And if we're sowing in the flesh, we will reap in the flesh.
Okay, so let's get practical. Okay, I'm not necessarily a senior pastor. I'm not necessarily an emerging voice from the evangelical rhino.
You emerged a long time ago, and
no, I'm not talking about me. I'm asking the question on behalf of our audience.
Okay,
who are not all senior pastors.
No,
maybe 80%, but not all. I don't know how many are pastors. How do you identify this in yourself? How, what's the best way that you can think of to really, because most of us are trying to do the right thing, right?
Yeah.
So how can you not miss it that you're doing the right thing for the wrong reasons? Do you have any good advice?
Well, the important thing is really just attending to why am I doing what I'm doing, and how am I evaluating and I think we all have this innate sense of taking our spiritual temperature, of looking at our leaders and how are we judging our leaders? Am I glad I go to the church I go to because it's powerful? Am I impressed with people because I find them powerful? I find myself looking at Christian professional athletes, for instance, in certain kinds of ways. And then I'll hear them talk about Christianity. I'm like, wow, that person has no idea what they're talking about. And I'm surprised, as if being famous surely meant they were theologically kind of astute, why am I projecting this upon them? How do I judge my own Christian life? Am I thinking that, well, as long as I gain control, right, as long as I take disciplines, go to the right church, do the right Bible study, am I kind of constructing this life in my flesh in order to be successful, in order to be great? Have I bought into, as we mentioned before, something like the prosperity gospel?
Yeah.
Evangelicals, I don't think usually go all the way, although maybe that's debatable today, but all the way towards like prosperity, like we were talking about with Trump. But usually we have a spirit prosperity gospel. Right? As long as I do X, Y, and Z, then I'll have the life I want. Right? Then I'll be mature. Then I'll be holy. And it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How am I wrestling through these things?
Yeah, and I think as a pastor myself, I think the conversation we had with Eugene Peterson was incredibly helpful for me in this regard. And one of the practices that he commended in our conversation with him is to be relentlessly personal. And for Eugene, that means a lot of things. But one of the things that means, especially for pastors, is this, that we are in a position of power. This is just true.
Mm-hmm.
We are in a position of influence and power. And whether it's a youth group of 20 students, whether it's a congregation of 5,000, when you are up front for 30 or 45 minutes saying something, that is a unique position to be in our culture, right? There's not a lot of settings in which we find ourselves doing that. And so there's a position of influence and power where people are hanging on our words. We're making decisions based on our words. And so the power is inherent to the vocation. But one of the things we can do to be more open to our temptations in that, as well as to invite us into our own weaknesses and kind of keep us grounded, is to have relationships with outsiders who are not impressed with us being pastors. The last time I was on a plane and that vocation question comes up, and what's interesting for me now, the temptation is always before me. Well, do I say I'm a pastor or do I say I'm a writer now? Right? Because one certainly has a different connotation than the other. If I say I'm a writer, like, oh, wow.
Right. Cool.
Published books. Mm-hmm. If I say I'm a pastor, it's like conversation is over. Right. Or I start getting an earful about, wow, and so having relationships with outsiders, having relationships with people that aren't kind of in our immediate church context or kind of broader evangelical cultural context that aren't impressed with who we are in our vocation. And secondarily, it's having more personal friendship, peer-to-peer relationships, even with people in the life of your church, right? That all relationships and structures in the life of your church aren't kind of funneled up in a hierarchical fashion that kind of keeps me always up in front or above others,
right?
That I'm grounded, that I'm in people's homes, that they're in my home, right? That
wearing your pastor pants all the time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, and I think, once one of the goals that we had in the book was if we can reframe the power structure around love as Jesus did, that flattens out all these hierarchies. Right? If love is actually a kind of power as it is in the kingdom, and Martin Luther King Jr. I think nails this point. He has a very interesting discussion of how the temptation is precisely your earlier question, was we're tempted to think we shouldn't have power at all, just to demonize power. Right. And MLK says, no, that's not right, because love is a power.
Yeah.
And it's the power that actually bears witness against the powers and principalities. The question I think we have to wrestle with, wherever we find ourselves, is if we give ourselves to the way of love, are we open to the consequences? because inevitably the powers and principalities actually come to the surface then.
What do you
That
mean?
by standing against evil, they come to the surface.
What do you mean? The consequences of love. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, let's stay with MLK because he's a great example of this. You know, Martin Luther King recognized that if he gives himself to nonviolence, violence will always be the result.
Oh.
The goal of nonviolence is to awaken violence, to expose it to reality so everyone sees what it really is.
Right.
And so if we're in the church, as many of us are, right, as evangelicals, we're all in a church of some kind, even not an individual church, but a collective church that has in all sorts of quarters given in to this way of power. If we stand against it, we have to suppose that it's going to actually awaken a negative response.
Right.
Yeah.
And the question is, how are we going to deal with that? Right?
This is an embrace of the way of the cross, right?
Yeah.
The height of irony is this biblical truth that at the cross, where Jesus was openly mocked and put to shame, he was in fact shaming the rulers and authorities, the principalities and powers, that it looked as if he was being defeated, but in fact he was signaling a victory. And the truth is, if we embrace the way of the cross, it will look like earthly defeat. We will be viewed as foolish. We will be viewed as unwise. We will be viewed as weak. And yet the truth is, as we embrace the way of the cross, which is a way of self-sacrificing, self-giving love, we are putting the rulers and authorities to open shame. We are participating in Christ's declaration that he has triumphed in victory over them.
So, I mean, you guys are being very polite about it and and self-referential things, but
Loving.
Knock
it off.
What you,
Enough with the love stuff.
Yeah.
if we read between the lines a little bit, you're saying a couple of really important and dangerous things, if I can put words in your mouth. One is an awful lot of the evangelical church has actually sided with the way of demonic power rather than the way of the cross. And secondly,
Them seem like fighting words.
they are fighting words, but they're important. And secondly, that are bent towards grandiosity, towards power and influence, mega everything, political power. All those are all signs that we are actually not following the model of Jesus, which then we shouldn't be all that surprised that the church is in the condition it is in the United States.
Totally.
So my last question is, where do you find hope? I mean, given to where we are, given the history we've seen over at least our lifetimes, what gives you hope as you look at the future of the church, at least in the North American context?
Yeah. You know, one of the things that shocked us in a sense, and I don't think it's not that we had all these kind of presuppositions coming into these interviews, but one of the things that surprised us is of all these people, these 7 different individuals in very different contexts, theological contexts, geographical contexts, kind of all over the map. And you know, all of them just exuded joy, and all of them were incredibly hopeful. And none of them hesitated to name evil in the church, and none of them lost hope. And you know, for Jamin and I think one of the things we've learned is growing up in the mega church, becoming Bible students and seminary students, I think we jumped over, and it was very easy to just demonize everything big.
Right.
And then we went into the small churches and we found the exact same things going on. And we kind of realized, you know, this is everywhere. And just because you're big doesn't mean you've given into this way. Just because you're small doesn't mean you haven't, right? And the hope we have ultimately is that Christ has defeated these things.
Yes.
And I think one of the things I think we're seeing culturally, I hope, and this is where I'm hopeful, is that we're seeing a real split now between a certain form of fundamentalism that still links itself with power and the culture and in a very political kind of way, in a very kind of certain sort of ecclesial way, and a whole group of evangelicals that have awoken to this is death. Yeah. And if we keep giving into this way, it is death. And what's encouraged me about the book and the whole process is we have kind of created these friendships now across the theological spectrum, very progressive on one side, very conservative on the other side. And they seem to be saying the same thing as, I see this too. Yeah. And we need to do something about it. And I've been pleasantly surprised by that. I was a little worried that one side would just demonize us and one side would embrace us. But I've been surprised at how many people have said, yeah, I wouldn't have put it this way maybe, but yeah, I see that and I feel that.
Mm-hmm.
So you have hope. We're not doomed.
Yeah.
Can you save the church from this, what I could only call an American carnage?
I can't.
Okay.
American Carnage sounds like a great burger restaurant.
Carnage.
Heavy metal
That's
themed.
my heavy metal band.
Yeah.
Yeah. We played the inaugural. Did you see us?
No, no one did. The crowd's very small.
We were
Very small.
No, we were everywhere. There were billions of people there. Didn't you see us? Mm-hmm. My pink hat? No, that was a different day.
Were you at that march?
No, my sister was, but not in D.C. Somewhere else. It's on her Facebook page. You can go light it up. Okay, let me try to summarize this with a song. That was really interesting, guys. And now I'm going to try to summarize what we just said. I just spent some time with a guy named Jamin. There's a problem in the church that he's been naming, and it's that we're all obsessed with power. We just talked about it for an hour. Now he's got a buddy, his name is Kyle. He's been sitting next to Jamin for quite a while, and his last name is Strobel, and his dad and he are going global, yeah, to figure out how to save the church. It could be a lot better. I guess it could be a lot worse, but if you read his book about dragons and lambs, you'll come a little bit closer to loving like the great I am. Yeah, that was not terrible.
Well done.
That could have been worse.
Not terrible. That's an achievement.
That's the bar I aim for every week. If I can achieve not terrible, I can go home and rest well.
We all can.
And look for a little more power next time. But love power. Love power.
Power.
Wasn't that a Mike Myers film?
No, that's a Huey Lewis in the News song.
The Power of Love.
The Power of Love.
It's power of
Remember
love.
from Back to the Future?
Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
okay. Do you guys, are you too young for that? Are you younger?
No, I love it. That was like our theme song for this book.
That's right.
Power of Love.
The whole time we were
That's
writing it.
fantastic.
Yeah, we hit on it. Thank you,
Okay,
guys.
Jamin and Kyle,
Thank you.
thanks for being on the show. All of you out there, thanks for listening and watching. If you want to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/Phil Vischer. And there are new episodes of the movie proposal.
Yes.
Covering the movies
La La Land.
and
Silence.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's
They're
exciting.
fantastic reviews of those movies. I liked one of the movies a lot, and the other one.
We will see you guys next week. Thank you.
The Phil Vischer Podcast is produced by Phil Vischer Enterprises and recorded live at Jellyfish Lab Studios. This episode was edited by Jason Rugg and was fact-checked by absolutely no one. For more information, go to philvischer.com.